For more on this story, let's now speak to a sports journalist, Thabiso Mosia, who is joining us on the line. Thabiso, thank you so much for making time for us. I mean, this speaks to the frustration of the fans for them to peacefully picket outside the Naturena village. Are their frustrations warranted?
Yes, good afternoon, colleague. Great to be talking to you. I think they are. They are really warranted because we know that Kaizer Chiefs have fallen off spectacularly from their glory days. You know, they used to be a powerhouse in South African football on the field of play. There might be a powerhouse right now off the field of play, which seems to be where their priorities seem to lie. But on the field of play, they have really gone backwards. And you can understand why the fans are frustrated. The tensions are rising. And I think this might continue up until the end of the season, because we might have only seen a handful of fans today at Naturena, but they represent millions of Kaizer Chiefs fans around the country. Maybe the march was a bit rushed. They didn't have enough time to mobilize, but they've certainly made a statement by marching to Naturena. But it's not the first time, though, and you wonder when things will change, because back in 2021, after Kaizer Chiefs lost the league on the last day of the season, they also marched to the club's headquarters and they had a memorandum and they had their grievances, but not much has changed since then. And from what I understand, the fans are just complaining about the lack of ambition at the club, the lack of quality when it comes to players, the lack of depth also. And that's why you are hearing many of them asking for the club to appoint a new coach, because it is baffling that Kaizer Chiefs decided to hand the reins over to two unproven assistant coaches who had actually come with the previous coach. So they were not even recruited by Kaizer Chiefs, these assistant coaches, but they were part of the technical team of Coach Naturena Nabi. They have no proven track record as head coaches, especially Coach Khalil Ben Yusuf has been an assistant manager throughout his career. He's been an analyst. Coach Kaizer maybe had a stint in Tanzania as a head coach, but he's been behind the scenes most of the time. And I think it is a gamble that has backfired spectacularly for Kaizer Chiefs. And that's why the fans then want accountability.
But it is also important to stress that under these two coaches, they at least made the group stages of the CAF Confed Cup and, you know, narrowly losing out in terms of progressing to the quarterfinals. And also with the season itself really starting off strong, it looked like there would be title contenders. Where do you think it has suddenly gone wrong now under the co-coaches Kazi and Yusuf?
Well, I think it went wrong when they appointed them as co-coaches. It was never going to be, like you said, they got off to a good start, but it was never going to last until the end of the season, because they just lack the experience, especially coaching a club of this magnitude of Kaizer Chiefs. You referred to them making the group stages, which was wonderful to see Chiefs back in continental football in action, but the way they bombed out of that CAF Confederation Cup, it shows you the lack of experience in this technical group. Because if you remember, they played a game against Zamalek in the group stages where they equalized late in Polokwane. It was 1-1. There were 3 minutes left. But the players started celebrating and running around the pitch instead of going out there to look for the winner. And then in the other game against Al Masry, they needed to win by a 2-goal margin. And there was another game happening in Zambia at the time featuring Zesco. And when Chiefs was leading 2-1 in that game against Al Masry, they started wasting time. Goalkeeper Brendan Peterson was going down. Other players were just wasting time, even though they needed an extra goal. And it looked like there was no message coming from the bench pushing them to try and get that 2-goal margin of victory, which would have made sure then that whatever happened in the last game against Zamalek didn't matter, because they would have automatically qualified for the group stages. So the way they imploded, it shows you that there's a lack of experience. Also, poor mentality from the players also, because as much as you can blame the coaching staff, the players are missing chances also. The players are the ones wasting time when they go into the game knowing that they need to win by a 2-goal margin. So it looks like there's no leadership on the bench to guide these players on the field of play. And even though they did well in the league, and credit to them for winning matches in the league, but it also was not eye-catching, Tony. Let's be honest. They were winning narrow 1-0 victories. If you look at Kaizer Chiefs this season, they've played 18 matches. They've scored only 16 goals. And that is not a sign of an exciting team, because we know the Chiefs fans want victory, but they also want to win in style because of how Kaizer Chiefs is known from back in the day to play football. So I think that's why, for me, it's not surprising that they've dropped form like they have now, considering how well that they've started. And also, if you look at at the technical team also, there is no local on the bench. These guys are new to the country. They came with the head coach, Nabi, who is no longer there. But the management of Kaizer Chiefs didn't even make sure that at least they've got somebody that is local on the bench, at least that can teach them about the intricacies of South African football and just the mentality of how to deal with some of these players, because we know obviously the dynamics in South Africa are completely different. If you look at the other big clubs that Kaizer Chiefs fans compare themselves to, and rightly so, even though Sundowns brought a card also, but they kept the Steve Kompela on the bench. Even though Orlando Pirates brought in an Abdeslam Wadu, they kept a Mandla Ngikazi on the bench. But the Chiefs, that's not the case, and that's why it seems like they've lost that identity and that culture of Kaizer Chiefs.
Yeah, that is a very important point that you bring across. And in terms of that memorandum that was delivered, one of the things that they've said is that they would love to see a new head coach that is appointed, detailing there in terms of the names, the likes of Thabiso Mosia, Dr. Khumalo, Benny McCarthy. How realistic and feasible is this? Do you think the management is in a position at the moment to bring in a new head coach, or even the coaches that they have asked for?
Yeah, it's a tough one, because it's also baffling that with a Thabiso Mosia with a proven track record and pedigree, he's available, but they're not even seemingly making any attempt to speak to him and try and entice him to come to a club like Kaizer Chiefs. His son actually plays for the Kaizer Chiefs Juniors, so he spends most of his Saturdays at Naturena, or even during the week to go and have coffee there sometimes. But it does not look like that is the direction that the Kaizer Chiefs management want to go. And you ask the question, then why is that? You know, is it a lack of ambition? Is it because they do not want to open the checkbook? And I think for me, that has been one of the biggest problems at Kaizer Chiefs, because they have all these sponsors coming in. And the reason the sponsors are coming in is because of their loyal fan base. You know, obviously, when you go out to the to corporate or to the sponsors to look for support, you show them your numbers, and you know that Kaizer Chiefs is undoubtedly the most supported club in this country. They've got a lot of supporters, so which means the money is there. But the question is now, are they ambitious enough to spend this money and to open the checkbook, whether it comes, whether it is for the coaching staff or whether it is for the players? Because the other big criticism that the fans have labeled on Kaizer Chiefs is that the players that they're buying are just not good enough to play for a club like Kaizer Chiefs. And that's also been said by many legends, including Paul and Njanya, that some of these players are not good enough to wear Kaizer Chiefs jersey because the club is not willing to go out there and compete in the market with clubs that are spending. You've seen now clubs are spending, they're even going outside of the country to look for players, but it doesn't look like Kaizer Chiefs have the same ambitions or the same willingness to open the checkbook. And I think that's part of the reason then why they probably seemingly not looking in the direction of a Thabiso Mosia, because there is belief that obviously he will come at a cost, having coached some big clubs on the continent, a big club on the continent, and some clubs in the UAE. But if you really, really want him, you can go out there and get a coach, Thabiso Mosia, because he is available right now, unless then he doesn't suit what Kaizer Chiefs want to achieve, which also you fail to understand, because we know Coach Thabiso would want to come with his own technical team. Coach Nabi was allowed to come with his own technical team also. And also on that note of Coach Nabi, I had some of the fans here saying that Chiefs disrupted the team because Coach Nabi had taken them into preseason. It actually ended a 10-year trophy drought last season, but they parted ways in the beginning of the season because apparently he had a lack of qualification. And it goes back to the management then. Those who hired him, did they do enough background checks to make sure that he's qualified enough to be able to sit on the bench in the CAF matches, which seems to be the reason why they parted ways? And if they really wanted to keep the coach, they could have found other ways. We saw teams like Zesco appointing a coach that was coaching in the Confed Cup, but they had another coach for the league. Or they could have tried to speed up the process of helping Coach Nabi also obtain these qualifications that he was missing. So I think that management must take a lot of responsibility here, because what is clear is that these two guys will not be on the bench for Kaizer Chiefs next season, surely. So that's why the fans then want them to start now looking for a coach.
All right, Thabiso Mosia, fascinating there in terms of the insights that you've brought forward. Thank you so much for your time. And also interesting because the fans have said in their match against Durban City, they don't want the co-coaches on that technical bench. And we will see whether Kaizer Chiefs management will be adhering to these demands that were brought forward this morning. That is Thabiso Mosia, sport journalist, of course, at the SABC.